Welcome to the Stranger Than Fiction podcast. Again, I'm your host, Patrick Meekin. I'm the author of Nightmare in Holmes County and 225th Street, which both tell terrifying true stories of spiritual warfare and paranormal activity in real-life haunted houses. Both books are available on Amazon.com. I have a very special guest tonight, all the way from the United Kingdom. Her name is Demi Chaplin. She has a very interesting story of deliverance from the occult and the forces of darkness. So I want to welcome you to the program tonight, Demi.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on. Your story's fascinating. If you don't mind, let's kind of start at the beginning. What was your upbringing like? What was your house like growing up? Was it a Christian home? How were things, for you as a child?
So I was raised in a Christian family. We went to church twice a Sunday. I think we were evangelical or Pentecostal, but we went twice a Sunday, very lively churches. And I believed in God. I'd only ever known to believe in God and to believe in Jesus. And so, I had a heart for God, a heart for Jesus. And I liked going to church. I didn't really understand why we had to go every Sunday or like all the ins and outs of what we were actually doing there. But I enjoyed playing in the kids' church and things. So I enjoyed that aspect of it.
Okay. And what kind of happened? Were there like a series of events that kind of led you down a path that led you into the occult? How exactly did that happen?
So like I said, I was raised in the church. And so I was very much like, I loved God and I loved Jesus and I loved loving people. But I also loved horror, and I'd felt this way since I was younger, like from a young age. And so I'd watch horror movies all the time and write horror stories at school and horror TV shows and things. And then when I was about 9, I saw a ghost for the first time. And then shortly after I saw another one. And so I don't know to go into that, but as I started to see these appearances, I've got more interested in like the church were teaching these things were bad, but I found it quite interesting, quite intriguing. So that's kind of like how my first interest came into it. So I was already watching like dark things anyway, not really dark, but I always had that interest there. But It wasn't until I started to see like these ghost things that I had a little bit more interest in it.
Okay. Now, when you say you saw what appeared as ghosts, so you saw them appeared as people and then they disappeared. What led you to believe it wasn't actually a person standing there? And then also, did you believe they were like ghosts in the, technical term, as far as most people believe a human spirit, or did you think they were demonic? What was your take on that?
So, when I was 9, I don't remember like too much about that one. I might have been a little bit younger. I remember I was in a bar and there was like, we were like doing this jury party with my mom on one side, and the other side was like people just having a drink. And the bar went all across the room. So it was clear division. And there was this one man at the bar and he was just sitting on his own, like just looking a bit strange. And then as I turned to talk to my friend, the same man, because he was very distinct looking, came walking past us. And I was like, whoa. And then my friend also realized he had just like moved across the room, and she started to cry because that freaked her out. And then afterwards, when we told our parents and they told the pub owners went, yeah, this pub's haunted. People do see people. So even though like you can never 100% confirm at the time it was like a ghost, it was very likely that it was because of, the situation. Yeah. But then the ghost I saw not too long after that, but I didn't actually see it. I was in the toilets with the same friend actually, of this old like gymnastic building we used to go to, and we hadn't been in these toilets before. And one of the cubicles was occupied, and as I was waiting for her to come out, I heard a little boy like singing or saying something in there. So my friend finished and we was kind of like listening into him, and we thought he'd like locked himself in or something. So are you okay? And he wasn't really answering, and it kind of went quiet. So we thought we'll go and tell someone. And as we turned to go and like tell someone, the door to the cubicle flung open, and it was just swinging and there's no one in there. So we like screaming, running out, and that like freaked us out. So that time definitely it was something paranormal, and I knew for sure it was. But that was kind of like really interesting to me. I was like, that was quite fun actually. And so again, that kind of made me more interested. So, and then over the years, then I started to see more like some human form, some more things moving. You didn't really see anything. And then others kind of a shadowy, orby looking thing.
Like a shadow person thing, just moving out of the corner of your eye, so to speak.
Yeah.
So that was all kind of drawing you into that interest in the dark side of the spirit realm, you know. And then what kind of led you deeper and deeper into that, where you actually like embraced it?
So at the time I was still going to church, and I was kind of like 13, 14. And so I'd still believed in Christianity my whole life. And especially at school, I realized just how different I was to the other kids. Like I wanted to really love people and just talk truth over people, and my interests were different. And so I really embraced that part of Christianity, but I still didn't really know what it meant to have a relationship with Jesus. I'd heard people in church say it, and it all sounded very lovely and exciting, but I'd been like trying to be the best Christian I could be, or a good Christian, and I wasn't really feeling that. And so I kind of, because I was already feeling a bit lonely and isolated at school, and people were kind of like just treating me as the goody Christian, I was like, well, I kind of wanted to feel something with God, like just to show he was here with me and that it was all worth it. And so I'd be praying in my loneliness, like, God, please just show me that, you know, you are here, and I want to have this experience that you're giving other Christians. And nothing was happening. And all I was having instead was just these visitations. And so one evening, one night I was in bed and I was wide awake because I used to have chronic insomnia. And it was 3:07 in the morning, because I just checked my phone because I was thinking, oh, I'm not sleeping well. And so I am trying to get to sleep, and I felt something come into the room, and like it felt as though it was a human, so I could feel like a human presence. And I was like, oh, is that my mom? Or like but then it kind of felt uneasy, and my heart started to beat so fast. I was thinking, this is weird. And so I turned around, and there's this big shadow figure by my bed, and he had like a very pale face and two kind of black eyes, but I clearly saw it. And so I turned back around, like really like shook up actually. And so yeah, that visited me. And I was like, oh, and the next morning I like told my mom, and she's like, oh, we'll pray over the house, it'll all be okay. But I was thinking, like I've been praying to God to have visitations and for someone to visit me, and God hasn't been doing anything, and Jesus hasn't like been revealing himself to me. But all my life I've had these spirits reveal themselves to me. And so I just naturally felt more drawn to connecting with them, because God just felt distant. He didn't feel reachable. He didn't feel like he was there, but these spirits did. And that just made no sense, because I've tried to be a good Christian and do everything right. And yet I was just having more paranormal experiences than I was holy, if you like.
Yeah. They're like basically making their presence very well known. Showing you, not even. It's interesting you said like you felt it enter. That is common. And I mean, when people are feeling that, people that don't have, issues that would cause this otherwise, you do feel a presence. You definitely do. And then if the fact that you felt that and then saw the figure, that had to be terrifying. I mean, that would be very interesting. It seems like, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I should say that was the second time that happened. So I was already kind of, or third, like every time I saw an apparition, like I always felt something first. So when that thing was in my room, I was used to that feeling of, okay, this is something else. I just never had that feeling in my own room before. So that was more of the scary part, like, oh no, it's actually here. So
yeah, that's very interesting. It almost seems like God had plans for you, and Satan was trying to interfere and distract you and derail your call, I guess, is a way of saying it. Because it seems like the more you seek God, the more these manifestations are showing up to draw you a different direction, So you begin having this activity of actually seeing entities. What happens after that?
So after really that one by my bed, after that happened, I started to notice they started to get a little bit more common, and my thoughts started to get more negative, and my like dreams, like things started to get a little bit darker after that. So I think that visitation was significant in some way. So for instance, I'd be like, every night I had nightmares, and I used to have nightmares every night anyway, but they would start to get more like darker. And that figure was always there. Like I'd be having some nights, if I was having a nice dream, he would pop up and like drag me to hell or something. Like he was always there. And then a few weeks later, I was sitting in my room, and my door opened on its own, and that always used to happen, and a cold presence would come in. But on this one occasion, this like orb. I don't know what it was, like this shadowy thing just like kind of slowly came into the room. And I was looking at it thinking, oh, my eye is like playing tricks on me. So I was looking at it. And then the more I stared at it, the more I started to feel like anger and hatred, like just this presence of, just anger. And so I was like, it compelled me to speak to it. And I was just like, who are you? And then as I said that, I received a vision in my mind, like really clear, of a little boy being abused. And I just knew everything about this boy. I knew his name and his background. And then I kind of snapped out of it, and the fog had gone, and I didn't really know what just happened. So I thought it's a little bit strange, but yeah, so that was a bit weird. But even though the fog wasn't there, I still kind of felt like something was around me or watching me or hadn't left me. So that put me on edge a little bit. And then the more I started to look into like those things that I'd seen, the more I saw that like it was linked to like clairvoyancy, that clairvoyants also saw these things in their images. And so I was confused because in one respect, I was still trying to cling on to being this good Christian girl. But the second thing was that like every supernatural spiritual encounter I was having was to do with things that the church had told me I shouldn't be doing. Yeah. And so I really didn't know what to do, because I really did believe in the afterlife and the spiritual realm. But what I was being told to believe wasn't being made true to me. It was the opposite. It was everything I was being told that I shouldn't be dabbling in. So, yeah.
A couple of interesting things there. One, the dreams, the nightmares, were they reoccurring as far as the same dream happened more than once? Or it was more like the dreams would always have the common theme of that hooded figure in the dreams? Or was it like a combination of both?
It's hard to remember because every single night, like for like most of my life. So I remember that figure, like hooded thing, being in most of them. I don't know if he was doing the same thing in them all, but it would just be like a dream, and then he would just appear, and then he would take me to hell. He always took me to hell. That's what he'd like to do. And then other demons would join in. And as I got a bit later on in life, they would start to show me like ways to kill myself. They'd be telling me I'm going to join them in hell anyway. So just, do all these things, commit suicide because I'm going to hell anyway. And they'd start to tell me things. And to be honest, the next morning I didn't take much notice because I did just see them as dreams. I didn't think it was anything significant happening, just because I was so used to having nightmares.
Yes. And, the other point I wanted to make is that as you're telling this, it's very clear that, okay, and this is how it works in the paranormal field, I believe. There's biblical truth that explains everything, but it requires faith. But at the other side of it is the devil has a counterfeit for everything that's godly. And in the paranormal field, in the paranormal realm, there's all these counterfeits to lead people astray, to lead them away from truth. And it's very believable because they're getting evidence and all this that requires little or no faith. They're being shown this, and I think the Bible is very clear. If you believe, you will see. It's not seeing is believing is seeing. When you believe, you will. When you have that faith, you will see what is truly going on, and that's hard, like especially at the age you were at when you're experiencing this. Those are the times that are very difficult in a lot of people's lives anyway, because you're transitioning from a child into an adult. There's a lot of stuff going on. So you're very vulnerable, I think, during that time period,
Yeah, I was like trying to like kind of make sense of the world because I've always been taught one thing, that Jesus is the way and all these things was evil. But everything about myself was experiencing the opposite. And so it was just a really conflicting time because I really didn't want to go to hell and displease. It wasn't actually even about going to hell. It was just displeasing God, because I really did want to love people and be the best person I could be. But I couldn't. But I felt like to deny horror was to deny myself, because that's what I loved more than anything.
Yeah.
And it was making itself more real to me than the church was.
Yeah. And, there is an element where, how do I say this? An interest in that there's a legit interest. You just have to be very careful, because there is a spirit realm and there is good and evil. But you have to be very careful, because the devil, again, is always has his counterfeits out there to lead you down a lie that describes and explains the spirit realm, versus the Bible has the truth regarding that. But it is very real, and I think there is a curiosity to know more.
Mhm.
we're eternal beings. So there's always a curiosity to know more about the afterlife and things like that.
Yeah.
But I kind of had an interest like that when I was a kid as well. And I was raised in a Christian home, but we would go to the library, almost weekly. My dad would take us to the library. We'd all get books to read. And a lot of times I got books about ghosts and things like that. So I totally get what you're saying. But so what happens then? It starts transitioning you further into the dark side.
So I think the most significant change was that I was in such a low place at school. Like, I wasn't really fitting in anywhere. Like, I had friends, but I still wasn't really part of the group because my views and my opinions and my interests were just so different. And so, and they kind of noticed that in me, and they would just kind of treat me like the goody Christian girl. And I got taken advantage of quite a lot by the people around me. So I was hurting quite a lot. But I thought, as the Christian girl, it was my job to always be happy, always be forgiving and loving, and
Yeah.
never conflict with anybody. So I was kind of letting anyone treat me however they wanted and still being nice to them. And it started to hurt me a little bit because I was thinking, like, am I worthy of being like not being treated nice to? And all these voices at the time, these demons in the dreams, like I had that in the background telling me I'm going to hell and that I'm worthless anyway. And
Yeah.
so the two kind of merging up, and I started to believe it. I started to think, actually, I've tried my whole life to be there for God and tried my whole life to be a good friend, and yet all it's done is left me lonely. God's not revealing himself to me. The only things I have in my life are these spiritual experiences from these demons, apparently. And so I thought, well, what good is Christianity doing for me when it's just making me feel bad about myself for liking the one thing that is revealing itself to me?
Yeah.
And so then I started to go to house parties and drink and just do things that didn't really line up with Christian values anyway. So I thought, well, instead of being a hypocrite and just believing in something for the sake of, because I'm told to, I have to start doing, discovering who I am for myself. And so I kind of denounced Christianity then. And I thought, you know what, if it's true then, if it's true for some people, then that's their truth and that's okay. But at this stage in my life, I can't relate to it anymore. It doesn't make no sense. And so I dropped that and I started to look at other religions and other beliefs. But then finally I ended up with, I didn't really see it as Satanism. That's not how I saw it. I just saw it as like darkness and demons and things like that. But I didn't see it in a negative view. I just saw it as like the spiritual realm, the darker spiritual realm. Because I still believed in God and I still believed he was the creator God. But I just felt there was like other spirits out there that you can connect with. And it just so happened I connected with the darker ones. And so I thought, well, I'm going to connect with these because they're the ones who seem to want to connect with me. And so, and then I don't really know how it happened, but I just knew that Satan was the leader of these demons. I'm not sure where that came from, but I just felt connected to him more so than Jesus.
Yeah.
And so I said like a prayer and I was like, I denounce Christianity and Satan, you're my new God now. And I feel like you can use my interests better than how Christianity could. So use me. And that's kind of, after that, that's when things started to get darker.
Okay. Did you feel like, how would I say this? You were empowered at first by doing that? Like there was any power that came with denouncing Christianity and, seeking the dark side of the spirit realm. Was there anything like that happened after you made that decision?
I think I just felt more accepted. I felt accepted and I felt like they would use me more and make me more for who I'm meant to be than God. Like they would give me, like, I've already felt like I had powers, not in like a mythical sense, but like because I had that gift of clairvoyancy, I thought like Christianity was teaching me that's bad and that it was shameful. I felt like Satan was embracing that, saying, no, you're made this way and this is who you are. And I'm going to use that, because that's good. And I was like, oh, great. I'm not being shamed for who I am. And so I felt empowered in that way, I guess.
That is one thing too. Satan loves to isolate people and to make you feel that rejection. So you're completely isolated where he feels like he can work on you more. And in Nightmare in Holmes County, I had an experience where I was basically given an invitation, I felt, to do that, to make that decision you made. And it, like, I knew it was real. I knew I was being presented that opportunity and I was promised things. Yeah. I felt a very real presence when all this was happening. And then in the back of my mind, somewhere I had heard a pastor named Perry Stone. I had in the hauntings I was experiencing, I was studying everything I could get my hands on, trying to get delivered of this horrible situation. And somewhere along the way, I gotten some teaching DVDs from Perry Stone about, I think it was called, it was about, the video series was about cleansing your house and getting rid of devils out of your house. It was called Purging Your House. That was the name of it.
Mhm.
And he mentioned in there, and somewhere it stuck in my mind, that all of the devil's apples have worms in them. Like, he'll present you an apple, but there's a worm in it. You just don't know it yet,
Yeah.
And while all this was being presented to me, I somewhere in the back of my mind, I heard Perry Stone's voice say, all the devil's apples have worms in them. And then I said, no, I'm not going to do this. I said, if I accept that offer tomorrow, I'll be hit by a truck or I'll get cancer. And I said, and I started rebuking the devil. But I understand, believe me, when you're saying, you got to that place where it actually made sense to do that, to embrace the darkness, because you're so down and out and so rejected and those things that it really requires a lot of faith to fight through that. It really does. And at your age, that would be even more difficult, so that's totally understandable. And it's so clear how you were being set up. You were being set up by Satan, the whole way through there to get you to that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think another thing as well, because I just didn't want to be this kind, soft, goody two shoes anymore. Like, that for me was, as much as I loved people, I thought, well, you don't need to be a Christian to be a nice person. Certain people at church were like, they were like swearing and blaspheming and things like that, and they were still getting encounters with God. And I just felt like God had completely abandoned me and ignored me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, well, I've tried to be all this goody, nice person. It's just getting me hurt. Like, I may as well just be not like the rest of them, but you know what I mean? Just like not try so hard to please everyone when it's just going to get me hurt anyway.
Yep.
I don't want to feel, because I'm an empath, I really feel people's emotions so bad. Like,
Yeah.
and it really affected me. And I was like, I don't want to be this way anymore. And I felt like, because of my Christianity, that had made me be that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, when I turned to Satan, I was just like, help me harden my heart, help me be a cold person, help me just not have these emotions anymore. I just want to, I don't want people to use me or walk over me. I want to be like quite solid. And he did that. And then over the months, I started to get my heart getting colder and colder. My personality started to change quite a lot.
Yes. How did that manifest in your day-to-day life and your interactions with other people?
Mm-hmm. So I think, it's hard to know when it first started, but just over time, I remember my interests changing. And so, I liked horrors anyway, but now just the normal horror wouldn't do it for me. I'd have to watch something a little bit darker, and then that wouldn't do anything, and then a little bit more, to the point where I was watching banned horror movies, that's sick and sadistic, because it was just like, it was like feeding something in me, and I was like, oh, that's better. And every morning, this sounds awful, but I would, the Saw franchise where they torture people, I put that on every morning just to hear people scream, and I'm like, it was weird. It was like a Jekyll and Hyde, because the logical side of me that grew up in the church knew that that's obviously not good. Like, that's not healthy. But then the other side of me, I couldn't help that it felt like it was feeding something inside of me, like it was the right thing to do. So I was always in conflict with myself, which is why I did drink a lot, because I didn't like that side of me. But at the same time, it's who I was. Right. And it made me be a good writer as well, because at the time I was writing a lot of horror stories. And they were selling really well as well. I was doing freelance horror online, and so this side of me would make me write really good stories, and then more demons would come and they would help me write the stories. So that's how I got into automatic writing. And so it's just a very weird dynamic. But then eventually it starts to change your outward appearance. So I'd always dress in black. I only ever wore black, actually, and chokers and piercings in my face and things like that. So it was a gradual change, but it's very dark change, to the point where I had no compassion for anybody. Like, someone could probably drop down in front of me and I'd just be like, not my problem.
Exactly. And so demons have no compassion, that is for certain. And if they're influencing you, there will not be any. And so it's interesting, even like those Saw movies, they're terrible. They are that idea of all those movies where there's all that horrible human suffering and all those things, that is definitely that's so demonic,
Mm-hmm.
But so the idea of wanting to hear that, yeah, there's definitely, you're being influenced. But you mentioned automatic writing. Then you started doing automatic writing, and that you were asking for basically uh, assistance from the spirit realm with your writing, and you were writing horror.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually, when you asked for it, you got it correctly. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, so like I kind of like it's nothing that I asked like every time I wrote. I kind of just asked for it once. I was like, I like horror and I feel these dark spirits around me. Like if you can help me write, that's great. Because I actually never heard of automatic writing, so I didn't know what it was.
Mm-hmm.
But all I knew is that every time that I wrote, I would like black out and I'd type away, and then I'd kind of come into myself and realize I've just wrote a story. And then I'd read it back and think, wow, that's really messed up. Like some of the stories were so disturbing that even after I read it, I was like, oh, where did that come from? Like, that's really horrible. And I would recognize it was horrible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just don't know. It just used to happen to me. And, but because they were selling so well, I just thought, oh, well, this is just who I am. And, it's not harming anybody. I'd never actually do these things. And so in my eyes, it wasn't anything awful. It was just kind of my talent, if you like. I just thought that's what I was talented at.
Now, when this all began happening, did you begin any sort of ritualistic things or anything like that that would open up doors more, give you more power potentially, or basically more favor with Satan, so to speak?
Mm-hmm. I think in terms of like ritualistic things, I used to self-harm a lot. I was obsessed with death and blood, and I didn't know where that came from, but really strongly. And I just always felt the urge to see blood, to taste blood. And it sounds awful, but I just did. And every time I cut myself, I just wanted to see blood. I wanted to touch blood. And I felt like that pleased Satan. And no one had told me that, and I don't know where that came from, but I just knew it was the right thing to do. So that was kind of something I would do quite a lot because I felt like I had to do it.
Did that all start like later, after you've embraced all this? That's when the cutting started?
Yeah. After I embraced it, I felt the urge to start shedding blood.
Gotcha.
So that was like linked. And then, sorry, what's the question? Ritualistic things. And I think just for me, it's just listening to like heavy rock music. Like I listen to that horrible screamo music.
Yeah.
It's like really nasty stuff, especially mocking anything that mocked Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. And I didn't know why, because again, the logical side of me was like, well, actually, Jesus was a good man. Whether he's God or not is a different debate, but he was still very loving and he did all the right things. So I recognized it.
Yeah.
So I didn't know why I hated him so much, why I despised him, why every time I still had to go to church, I had to like say a swear word over his name. I hated swearing, but I couldn't control it. I had to like spew over his name. And so, I'd listen to all this music and that just felt like it was feeding something inside of me. And sometimes I just black out listening to it, and it's like I was absorbing this heavy, horrible music.
So you said like you would actually go to church when you're doing worship. You're replacing Jesus's name in the worship. In your mind, you're replacing that with like horrible words, swear words, things like that.
Yeah, I'd speak it out, and I never swore ever. Even when I was really angry, I didn't like swearing, and so I even used to think to myself, "Stop doing that," but I couldn't control it. It was really bad.
Yeah. So would you say definitely, and I think this is obvious, but a lot of the death metal and things like that, especially what like when you listen to it, there's an intention there on the musician's part to invoke a spiritual darkness. Would you say that is true?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just if it's not the lyrics, sometimes it's the videos. Like I liked, I don't know if you want me to name names, but Slipknot, like how they had the masks on and everything. I loved those. And you watch the videos, and they're all ones where they're all stabbing people. And I used to just absorb that. I think, wow. And so if you're not like that, you're singing it over yourself. So you're singing nastiness over yourself. And so, yeah, there's definitely a dark spiritual element to it.
Yeah. And, I was thinking just the way you could go into like the automatic writing and these demons are writing through you. I'm sure there's a part of that involved in their songwriting as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, I did dabble in the occult, but I wouldn't say I wasn't hardcore into it. I don't, maybe I was, but I think the people out there in the music industry who are more hardcore into it. So if I was like going through it, then they must be going through it 10 times as worse, I believe.
Yeah.
So
and I think they're actually evangelizing that side, I think, So in your case, you're practicing it individually, personally, And I feel like they are actually more out there evangelizing the dark side. And so, man, yeah, that I can't even, and I think they've embraced it so much. They're completely numb to it. I honestly, like, if they even had an idea what's ahead of them, I don't know how they can continue down that road. But so you are basically at this point, or you've become pretty much fully invested in this lifestyle and in this. Your appearance has changed. Your speech has changed. You're doing things like cutting yourself basically for the blood ritual, pretty much. Is that right? A good way of saying it? Like to shed blood.
Yeah, just for the sake of shedding blood. I was just obsessed for blood and death.
Yes. Did you actually like the pain, or you just like the blood?
Both. So I was so numb to everything that it actually felt nice to feel something. And that sounds awful, but I went from being like a very sensitive, overly, compassionate empath to then feeling nothing at all. And, I think that transition itself has to be, there's like something spiritual taking place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt nothing. And so the cutting actually made me feel something. And I felt like I was doing it for a good reason as well. So.
Right. Okay. So as you're, pretty much at this point, kind of in head over heels and into this, the darkness, at some point, do you, what happens where you start feeling like something has to change here? This is not a good thing. This is actually very bad. At what point did you start to see, that this was not a good idea?
So I didn't actually. I loved being, even though it was a battle, I thought that was more to do with me not liking myself rather than that occult thing being evil, because I was so used to darkness. I've been seeing ghosts and been interested since I was little. So it didn't scare me. I quite liked it. I just thought it was a different type of normality. And so even when it, I think, tried to kill me, one night I woke up and I had a noose around my neck from the blind behind me. It somehow in the night, it came over my neck and pulled me in tight. It would mock me, do different things. I'd hear my name calling all the time. And, it was very much mocking me and always around me. But I was so used to it that I didn't really care, to be honest. They were like my friends, if anything, just like, because it just didn't bother me. And so, sorry.
So you're saying like you're sleeping one night and you're by a window and the cord for the blind ends up wrapped around your neck. And you wake up with it choking you.
Yeah, so it was literally like hanging kind of behind my bed. No, you had to go all the way over to get over me. And I woke up and it was pulled tight and I was choking in my sleep. And that was just one of many things that happened to me. I'd like look up and I'd see like a claw across the ceiling, and I'd hear noises and lots of dodgy things. And my mom had picked up on it actually, like, because she'd always know that I'd hear my name called, and she would know that the doors only opened in the house when I was in the room. And she'd say, like, weird things only happen when you're around. Why is that? Like, why do your friends only see ghosts when you're there? Why is it always you? And I was like, I don't know. Like, that's just, it's just they're attracted to me. And I always say, like, I was attracted to darkness and darkness was attracted to me. And that's how I saw it. But it was just who I was. And I loved that side of me. So there was never really a time where I recognized it was like out to get me. But at the same time, I didn't really know any different. So I never wanted to leave it. I was very comfortable in the occult and until it started to kill me. So
no, when you're hearing voices and whatnot, like it sounded like people in the house calling you, or was it like like a deep demonic sounding voice, or did it sound like somebody, like a familiar voice, like someone else, that you knew?
It was my mom every single time. She would call my name. And it was only ever my name. And it was only ever my mom's voice. And I'd go downstairs. I'm like, yeah. And she wouldn't answer. So I'd run downstairs and she'd go, I haven't called you, Demi. And it'd be in the kitchen. It'd be in the other room. I mean, for years, I just remember when I lived at home, that's all I remember. And my mom was like, what? Like, it's not me. What do you hear? Like, you need to get your ears tested. And I did actually. And nothing was wrong with me. And so, so that was really bizarre. Those are the voices that I used to hear audibly.
Yeah, that's interesting too. I think like with the paranormal, the ghosts, they can appear as people, they can appear as doppelgangers, meaning people that are actually alive. In Nightmare in Holmes County, I saw my cat, appear, and it was not my cat. There was a delivery man who swore that he had delivered a package to me before. And I answered the door wearing a white jacket and talked to him. It wasn't me. I never did that. I didn't even own a white jacket, you know? And it's just interesting. They will mimic people. They'll mimic people that are alive with their voices or even appear as other people or animals. But clearly, they will mimic the dead as well, because then they're deceiving people. Oh, we don't go to heaven or hell when we die. We can stay here and haunt people and we don't have to be judged, you know, things like that. So that's what's coming to my mind when you're saying that, you know, is that how deceitful these spirits are, that they will, you know, mimic someone else and call your name, you know?
Yeah.
So what happens then as you start progressing and even though you're having these experiences that to most people would be absolutely terrifying, you're still full speed ahead into this.
Yeah.
So kind of take me from that point there where you're having these experiences with the, you know, the strangled situation and your mom's voice calling your name, things like that. Kind of take me from there and move forward here.
Yeah, so I was so used to all that at this point, and just comfortable around it. And so then I started to go on like ghost walks and ghost hunts and things. And I remember one time I went to it's like an old theater or something, and I could feel like the energy. I could feel, it's like I used to walk into a room and know what happened in that room. And so I walked into a room and I was like, people committed suicide in here. And I knew it. And I'd always have to make contact with something. So I'd touch the walls and I would see the visions and I'd feel the energy of the room. And it was very dark in there. And I remember a friend came with me and I told the leader who was leading the whatever it was. And he was like, yeah, they did commit suicide in here. And obviously I knew nothing about the building. And then we did like, I don't know what it was. It was this, if it's called a seance or something. We sat in a circle and held hands and they were like talking to spirits and nothing was happening. But then I started to shake because the anger and evil of this spirit started to reveal itself to me. And as I started to do that, luckily there was another lady in the room who could also sense spirits, and she started to vocalize everything I could hear in my head. She was like, oh, this spirit's evil. It's the spirit of like a suicide and it's angry. It doesn't want us here. And that's what the spirit was saying to me. It's like, we don't want you here. Like, get out.
Yeah.
And so anyway, afterwards I told that man and he was like, do you realize you're a psychic? And I was like, what? And no one had ever told me that before. And I was like, am I? And like, I don't know, that kind of stayed with me and it kind of made me feel like, oh, I've actually got a talent, because I never really saw myself as very talented. And so I remember that kind of stayed with me and I was like, wow, I think I really have got a gift here. Like, this is something, you know, if it was up to me, I would have gone into being like a full-time psychic and clairvoyant. But because my mom, I was very close to my mom and she was very born again Christian.
Yeah.
I knew that would never really be an option for me because I wouldn't want to like ruin our relationship. So for me, the closest thing I could do was just carry on writing my stories, like my horror stories.
Yeah.
And so that's why I went to university in 2017 to study writing with an emphasis on horror writing. And so, yeah.
So it's interesting. In locations where bad things happen, there's spirits there. And you know, I believe wholeheartedly that's what causes hauntings. You know, and suicide's a bad one, murder. You know, but bad things of any kind really open doors, and there will be spirits there, and that's what you were tapping into. You actually could see what happened and what opened those doors, you know, to the demonic realm. So that's very interesting. So now you begin college, you're studying writing, and you're specializing in horror writing.
Yeah, we focus on horror writing. And again, it's just stories were very dark. I remember one time the teacher, because I actually never read, I used to hate reading. And everyone else had been reading, like did A-level reading in English and things. And so I went there with not really much experience. I remember the teacher calling me over and she's like, the way you wrote this story, first of all, it's very dark and very twisted. And then second of all, she's like, the way you wrote it is so clever. Like it's just so technical. And I was thinking, well, I don't know how I wrote that because I never really saw myself as a good writer. But as I let these things take over me, they would do all the work. And so I thought that was interesting because in my own talents that I wouldn't be able to write something like that. So yeah, I carried on doing that. And then I drank obviously loads at uni, just drinking all the time. And because I was now not living at home, I could express myself a little bit more than how I was allowed to at home. And so my whole room was basically Halloween, like I had skulls. I was obsessed with skulls and death, like I said. So everything was like skull based. Everything was black. I used to drink from like this goblet, like with all demon hands on, and I used to pretend like it was blood and things like that. Like it was just very, very dark.
Yeah.
And I was just very cold with people. I was still like a fair person because I've always been quite very conservative. So it wasn't like I was nasty to people. I was still fair, treating people with respect. But when it came to like showing compassion to people, feeling sorry for the homeless, I used to love the homeless and always help them. And if I saw them, I'd be like, not my problem, help yourself. Like I was just very cold to people's suffering, if you like.
Yeah.
And so at this point, I didn't care at all. And I was obsessed with being hated as well, which is very strange. But like when I went into a room, I wanted to be the most hated person in the room. And so I'd say the most offensive, horrible thing possible, even if I didn't really believe in it. I'd hear myself say it just to make people not like me. And so because I hated myself so much that I really didn't care if other people hated me, it's a complete shift in who I used to be.
Yeah.
And so, so I was this person at uni. And then happened next. Oh, so then in the October when I first got there, my mum felt ill. And she felt quite ill. It was looking quite serious. And like I said, I was very close to her. And so it was really affecting me. And I noticed a Bible on the shelf of my uni accommodation. It wasn't a Christian uni, or maybe it was, but it didn't act that way. And so I took the Bible off the shelf and I was like, I remember in church where someone used to say they used to get a message from God and they'd put the finger across the Bible and feel drawn to a page, or God would give them scripture. I thought, I'm going to try that, see if, because that's my mum's God, and so if he loves her, he'll like give me a sign. So I got the Bible off my shelf. I haven't touched the Bible in years, and I was like, okay, got a Bible. If you're there and if you love my mum, I'm going to give you a shot. Show me that my mum's going to be okay. So I put my finger across the Bible and I felt drawn to one specific page. And as I opened it, it had a big upside down cross and it said, "Hail Satan." And that was the only page in the whole Bible that said those words. So at the time, it confirmed to me that I was on the right path, that Satan was hearing my prayers and that, and that he was listening to me. And so that was quite interesting.
So somebody had taken that Bible that was at the college and opened it up to a certain page, drawn an upside down cross and wrote "Hail Satan" on the page. And then when you pray, you are automatically drawn to that page without even touching that Bible before.
Yeah, I picked it up. I'd never touched it before. I never wanted to. And then that was the only page with it on. It's the only page I was drawn to. And I've got a photo of that, so I'll send you that so you can see it.
Okay. So move on from there. Okay, so now you're doing automatic writing. You're in college. You're studying this. You're having, you actually give God a chance, so to speak. You're trying to crack the door open a little bit, but Satan takes over that whole situation, as that whole experience as well.
Yeah. So, and like I said, I did still believe in God. Like I believed in Creator God, the God who made the universe, because that made sense to me. Like that, there was a Creator God. But it's just that I didn't see like a relationship. It was kind of, is it like deism, where God's there but he's removed, and you kind of he uses other ways to get through to you. And my way was Satan. Very mixed up theology there, but and so anyway, that happened. And so my mum ended up getting better, but then I started to get worse. I started to fall ill then, and at first it was just little things like a bad cough and a cold and whatever, and then started to get a little bit worse where like I'd get pains in my legs, and I was rushed into hospital one of the nights after work with a suspected blood clot. And then that was cleared, but I was still not picking up. I wasn't getting any better. And then over the months, I was getting worse and worse to the point where I was pretty much bedbound, couldn't breathe, had heart palpitations all the time, couldn't walk. And then my vision started to go. And then I couldn't eat. Every time I ate, I'd throw up. And so over the months, I started to get very, very skinny. And because of all this was going on, obviously my mind was then in a bad place. And I started to like feel really suicidal again and started drinking more to kind of just get me through the day, really. But the whole time I was still like very much involved in my horror, watching darker movies, darker, anything really that's just related to horror. And so, so it got to the point where about a year later, I was just completely really, really ill. I was like, I think 6, I don't know if you do stone, but I was 6 stone 7. So that's like very, very anorexic. And I was weak with it as well. Just fatigued. And then I started to bring up fresh blood out my mouth, like cough it up. And then I started having nosebleeds. I'd never had nosebleeds in my life. and then bruises would appear on my body. And so I kept going into hospital, in and out, and I'd had every single test you could possibly think of. And the doctors were just baffled. They could see that I was ill and that I was weak. But every test I was scoring like 100%. And there was things, and they were saying this doesn't add up. Like, we can see you're ill, but the tests say you're fine. And in the end, they sent me home from uni and went, you just need to be with your family because we don't know how to help you anymore. And I've actually got a note in my phone from 2018 saying, 2017, I'm going to die this year. Like, this is it. Like, there's nothing. The doctor basically sent me home to die.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of preparing for the end of my life, really. And I was like preparing to go and be with Satan. And so I was kind of being more involved in a way because I thought I'm about to go be with all these spirits. So I better start befriending them and getting close to them and things.
Yeah.
And so, preparing for end of life. And again, lots of weird things were happening to me still. My mind's gone blank, but just, lots of dark things were still happening. Like paranormal experiences were still very much, and near enough an everyday occurrence at this point.
Are you seeing like anything in particular that's happening, like the visitations at night, things like that, or is there anything in particular that's happening more during this time?
It was more so my stories are very, very dark. I remember that. Like, they were getting horribly dark. My thoughts were getting darker, my nightmares. And also just the presence of someone always being there. Like, that never left me since I was 15, but
Right.
even more so now. And I think I have, like, when I used to do my automatic writing, one of them said, I have like so many voices around me. I don't even know who to concentrate on because they're all screaming at each other.
Yeah.
And it's very evil. And I just felt very absorbed in all this evil. And again, there was still like a logical side of me like, this is not normal. This is not okay. But I just thought, this is who I am. This is the gift I have. It comes with the territory. That's how I saw it, really.
Yeah. So you're basically at this point, your health's failing. You're you're anorexic. You're basically, well, I wouldn't say bulimic. You are throwing up though. Every time you eat, you're throwing up, whether you're trying to or not. You're drinking more, which that's probably, making everything else worse as well, just for the damage it's done to your body. But so you basically start preparing to die, but not like, hey, I should get right with God because I might be dying here. You're actually going the other way still.
Well, I thought I was right with God, like, because when I used to I thought I was like that with God, actually closer than God than ever, because I felt like I'd finally found the path He wanted me to find. And so I believed in Creator God, and I believed in and I used to still sing worship music as long as it didn't mention Jesus, because that would get me angry. But as long as it's like just talking about just the beauty of God, I could sing along to that, and I would pray to God and Satan, like I'd pray to both of them. Like, it was just like one was the spirit of light, one was the spirit of darkness, but neither was bad. It was like a balance. You needed both.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I was still very much in love with God. And I thought that if I died and say if heaven was real, or I'd go there, or if it's hell, then I'll go there. Like, it's whatever way, I'd be fine. So it's very weird. But
it's interesting because a lot of Luciferian people, they actually believe that, they don't get into the Satan side of it, but they're still worshiping the same spiritual entity. But they will, they'll basically say, well, God is actually Lucifer, not Adonai, and it's kind of funny because it's almost like, without you consciously thinking about that there was a little bit of an element of that. You're still praying to God, but He's not at odds with Satan, so it's kind of interesting how that's starting to play out.
I think it's worth mentioning, I did recognize there was an area to like Satanism that could be evil, like a misinterpretation, because I knew about like what was going on in the government and the sacrifices they would make, like to the Illuminati or things like that. Like, and I knew that was evil. Animal sacrifices. I loved animals. I would never hurt an animal. And people who did that I thought was evil, and they were like possessed or something. And people who did child sacrifices, like, I still recognize that was an evil type of devil worship, like black witchcraft, if you like. But because I wasn't doing that, I felt like I was like, I found the balance. Like, I felt like I would be like so enlightened that I'd found the balance between, how you can dabble in it, but it's not evil. It's not too dark because I'm not hurting anyone. I'm just not, it's just like a personal growth with the spirit realm. So
you never got to a point where, like, when somebody wronged you, well, I'm going to do something spiritually that's going to hurt them for wronging me. You never got into that.
No, like, I'd get visitations of like wanting to like kill people and things, but I'd recognize it was wrong. And so
Mhm.
I'd say that and be like, oh, that's not right. And so I ignore them, but it would
Yeah.
get overbearing, but I'd be like, no, those are wrong thoughts.
Yeah.
And I was always quite fair. Like I'd never want to like do voodoo or manipulate people. I looked into that, like spells and things. I thought
Right.
that's very manipulative, and I didn't like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I was very passionate about truth. Like I always wanted truth and wanting to do the right thing. And just because of my childhood experience of darkness always revealing itself to me, I just thought that was the right thing for me.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really an evil intent. It just, yeah.
hmm So, as you're going through this and your health is failing, what happens then? Like, is your mom questioning this? I mean, what's going on with her and her church family or whatever that they, because obviously she's on a completely different perspective, and she's a born again Christian, and so what's she thinking? What's going on with all this from her perspective?
I don't know too much until like at the end. I think she said she was always praying for me. And I think she said she thought I was still Christian anyway. She just thought
Mhm.
I'd gone off like a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, but because I wasn't like my full self around her, like
hmm
she didn't, realize the extent of it. So I think she was praying for me, but she didn't know how involved I was. So she wasn't overly concerned. I
hmm
remember she did tell me once I was going to hell, and I just thought, okay. And then another time, like she said, oh, you look like a witch. Like when you dress like that, you shouldn't dress like that. But in my
hmm
head, I was thinking that's exactly like how I want to look. I want to look dark. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
and so she would recognize things about me. But one time I told someone from church that I worship the devil now. And it got back to my mom, and like she went mad. But because I was always joking and I had a very, very dark sense of humor,
hmm
like I said, Mom, I'm just joking. And so like she kind of thought, okay, it's not funny, but it was just a joke.
Yeah.
And so she was never like too concerned until like I started to fall really ill.
hmm
Um, and then God told her it was spiritual.
So God did reveal her to your mother that the whole issue with your health was all spiritual.
Yeah, so I went on a holiday in 2018, I think. Yeah. With my boyfriend at the time, and it was for my 21st birthday. Just before I went on holiday, I went to the cinemas to watch The Nun. And I used to watch, like I said, horror movies all the time. Didn't bother me. But this time I was watching it, and there's like a sense of evil come over me. There's a certain scene where it mentioned Jesus and his blood and everything. And as I was watching it, I heard a voice say, "This is evil." And it's like I had like my eyes opened. It was really strange. I was like, whoa. And I felt a presence of heaviness and evil in the room. And I was thinking, like, I don't think I should be watching this. And so I came a bit uncomfortable watching it. But I soon snapped out of it. I thought, don't be silly, like you always watch this stuff. So that happened. And then we went on holiday a couple of days later. And the holiday was fine. It's going well, it's nice. And then on the Tuesday evening, I had a dream of in church, and I never used to dream I was in church. But on this occasion I was, and the pastor put her hand on someone at the front to do a deliverance. And as she was delivering them, I started to manifest in the back seat. And my boyfriend at the time woke me up because apparently I was convulsing and like shaking in my sleep. And he was like, "Oh, like calm down." And I was like, and I went back to sleep, didn't think much of it. And then, so that was on the Tuesday night. And then the next day, I was lying on the sunbed reading your book. And and even though it was a Christian book, I think my mum gave it to me just because it's to do with horror. And so I only cared about the horror bit, not really the Christian bit. And I'd
Yeah.
like just play over the Jesus parts. But I
hmm
did find it interesting. So I was reading that. And after I finished it, I just felt an urge to put on worship music. And again, like, I didn't mind worship music, but these ones had Jesus in. But this time, instead of like cursing over his name, I just had my hands like kind of heavy and glued to the sunbed. And I was just weeping, crying my eyes out at this music. And then when it finished, I kind of snapped out of it. I thought, what am I doing? Like, I'm really stupid. So I wiped my tears and took no notice of it. And then so like, these weird things like were going on. And then some things started to be revealed to me about my boyfriend at the time, and like just things that I wouldn't know that would like eventually put an end to our relationship, but just things started to be revealed to me about things. It's strange. And then on the night of my birthday, we went to one of those haunted houses where people jump out at you. And I loved these. It's like the height of my entertainment. I used to go to them all the time and be the ones at the front to like lead people through. So I was really excited to go there. And as we walked in, and he paid like quite expensive to like for us to go, I kind of like felt a heaviness or like a presence of evil come over me. And I was like, and I didn't want to go in. And I was like, whoa, that's strange. And then my boyfriend like said, come on, don't be silly. Like, let's go in. So I went in, and about a minute into it, I was like, we can't be in here. This place is evil. I don't like it. I'm very uncomfortable. So we left. And then as soon as I left, I called my mom because I was laughing. I was like, Mom, you're never going to guess what? Like, I've just had to leave the horror house, like, because I didn't like it. And she's like laughing too, because it was just so out of character for me.
Mm-hmm.
So that was holiday. And then during this holidays, when I was still ill, and I called my mum saying, like, Mum, I'm dying. And she prayed, and God said it's something spiritual. So then she asked someone to pray for me. And apparently I agreed to this. I have no memory of agreeing to this prayer. So I came home from holiday, and she was like, okay, so you're going to get prayed for. And I was like, oh, well, why? And she's like, well, for your health. Like, it's just going to be a prayer. It's fine. So I went for a meal with my friend. And on the way back, I was driving home, and I thought, oh, well, it's just prayer. The worst that can happen is I get healed. And if I don't get healed, I can say to my mom, I've tried Jesus and everything, and it didn't work. So, I've proved you wrong or whatever. So I was driving. As I was driving, I started to shake like really bad, like petrified, and my teeth were chattering, and I was going like this. And I thought, Demi, like, stop it. It's just prayer. And so I got home, and I was waiting for the guy to come, and he came at 6:00. And as he walked in, he was this really tall guy, and I was this really small, anorexic, weak person. And this other lady who came in, and he looked at me, and he said, something big's going to happen tonight. I haven't felt nervous like this for a long time. And I was just thinking, that's a bit weird, but okay. And so he sat down, and as soon as he looked at me, my shoulder started to go like this, and like on its own. And I was looking at it thinking, what's going on? And I've never been one to make a scene. I've always been quite reserved and quite private. And so I was trying to stop my body, like, to say, like, come on, like, just, I don't know what's going on. Anyway, he called me into the middle of the room, just for like a healing prayer. That's as far as my mom was concerned, and I was concerned. And he was praying like in English. And my mom said I was being very rude, again, which wasn't like me at all. And I was embarrassing her, like I was mocking him and things like that. And then but I don't remember. And then as he started to pray in tongues, I flew off the chair, and then I blacked out. So yeah.
That's a deliverance began.
Yeah.
I'll put it this way. I'm happy to hear that somewhere on the other side of the world, my book had a positive influence in some small way on somebody, because you go through a lot of attack for sharing that stuff. When you write about this stuff, the devil is not happy, and he will attack you. But I'm glad that it had some sort of and that it could kind of reach somebody that was where you were. Because there is that horror element, it is a scary story, but it's got a good ending too. But it does have a, that scary side to it as well. I'm saying that to say this. That's one reason why I wanted to interview you, because I think this is going to go on the internet, and it's going to reach a lot of people, and that's important. That's going to share truth with a lot of people. Your story is going to share truth with people all over the world, and that's why I think that's important. And so again, I want to thank you right now again for being on. But you've gotten us up to this point where this. I'm assuming he was some sort of a deliverance minister, or some sort of a minister that understood deliverance. Your mom contacts him. He agrees he'll come and pray, and that you have agreed to allow that, but you don't remember even agreeing to it. So I think the Holy Spirit was at work right there as well. And I think with that episode where you actually listen to worship music, and we're feeling, I believe that's a feeling the Holy Spirit when you're, worshiping Jesus, and you're crying and things. But you've now gotten to this position where you don't remember agreeing to it, but apparently you did. And he starts to pray, and you start mocking him. And, the things you're describing are demonic manifestations, the basically involuntary movement in your body, the mocking of the minister, that's the kind of things that start happening. Even when you're driving home and you start having those, weird reactions where you're feeling fear, feeling your teeth chattering, that's the demons, because that's how afraid in reality they want to be on the side where they're dominating people and intimidating them. But the reality is they know there's power in Jesus' name. And if they know what's really coming. And so they're not going to be happy. They're not going to be happy about that. And they're going to be the ones feeling fear. So he starts to pray in tongues, and when he starts to pray in tongues, you fly off the chair.
Yeah. So I flew off the chair and I blacked out for most of it. So he was there for 3 hours. And I forgot to mention, so this was on a Tuesday evening. So this was exactly a week since I had the dream of me having a deliverance. So it's like God was showing me a week in advance,
Yeah.
just building me up the way that he was making me sensitive to like movies and the horror house and the deliverance. Yeah. He was slowly showing me what was about to happen to me. Obviously, yeah. I was oblivious at the time. So I flew up the chair and yeah, I was there for 3 hours. A lot of it I was blacked out for, but from what I've been told, I was distorting quite bad. Like I was lifting off the floor. Like my voices were changing.
Yeah.
The difference in my eyes was crazy, apparently. Like they could see it in my eyes. And then obviously I was very, very weak, couldn't even walk up the stairs, very anorexic. And yet it took 3 people to hold me down because I was that strong that they just couldn't contain me. And so, I was this big 6-foot man, I was like pushing him off me. And so that was like, that's how I know that wasn't me. And so that was happening. And then the only bits I remember really was like when I used to come into myself, and sometimes I would actually be me and I'd be really embarrassed. I'd be like, I'm so sorry, everyone, and I'd wipe my tears and try to straighten myself up, but then it would make me look at say the name Jesus again, and I'd black out again. And I could feel it manifesting in me. It's hard to explain really because it's not talked about. It's like you feel you, but you're not you. And so I could hear someone else talking through me. I could hear other things in my head, and someone else was moving my body. I don't know where I was. I was just watching. Somehow, I don't know. It was really strange.
Yeah, it's almost like you're a third person witnessing it, but you're witnessing it from your own body, from inside your own body.
Yeah, it's quite traumatic, actually. It's awful. But so that's how I was kind of experiencing it. And I remember them saying, kill her. And it was the little woman who come to help. And it was like wanting to strangle her. And I had to swear at her. But I really didn't want to swear in front of my family. And so I remember biting down so hard on my lips to stop myself from swearing. And then I remember another instance where one that I remember audibly very clearly was I was on the floor and I heard like a growl of a lion prowling around me, and I heard it growl 3 times, and I was looking around the room to try and find it. And my mum asked me afterwards, like, what was you looking for? I was like, couldn't you hear it? It was so loud. And it was really terrifying, actually. And that comes back in later on. But in the moment, that was, very scary. And so this all took place over a space of 3 hours. And he was casting bulimia, kundalini spirit, depression, or suicide spirit. And then he was listing very specific things. He read it. He had this whole list of things to be delivered from. And then he would stop over certain ones that he felt needed to be for me. And some of them were very specific that I'd never told anyone and still haven't to this day, that no one would ever know. And yet he stopped over those ones. I remember even the time thinking, how would he know that? That's really weird. And so obviously he was picking up all the different things in me that, needed to be cast out.
Yeah. The Holy Spirit was revealing to him through discernment. When you're saying these things, I'm like, yeah, I've been there. I've seen this. The thing of the flying off the chair, the face contorting, eyes changing, strange body movements, different voices. That's all commonplace in deliverance. It really is. And it's funny though. There was a little old lady there to help, and you really did not like her, or what you had did not like her. And wanted to swear at her, so she was helping in the deliverance process, apparently.
Yeah, I think they said she could see what was going on, so she was the one looking at them and telling them to go.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So, in a time frame, a lot of people, like people in the church a lot today, even if they believe in deliverance, they think that it's as simple as you say in Jesus' name, go, and the demon automatically leaves, and that's the end of it. It is not like that. It could be, depending on why the demon's there, how long it's been there, if there's legal rights, things like that. That's all, those are all issues. But generally speaking, it takes some time and patience and being thorough to get everything to go. But it's really interesting that that ministers pointing out things that nobody knew. I had an experience once, and I'm not going to get into all the details, but I had talked to this person before we started the deliverance, and they had told me multiple things that I knew, okay, here's a list of what I believe this we're going to be dealing with. And we started casting things out, and we got to a point where we were hitting a wall and nothing was leaving. And I felt very strongly that the Holy Spirit told me that this person had a particular demon, and that particular demon comes in through really bad abuse, through like trauma in childhood. But this person had never mentioned that. And you said about how you would come forward during the deliverance. Sometimes you would come forward and then you'd be embarrassed. Oh no, I don't want to, I'm sorry for whatever I'm doing, whatever, Well, this was, that is common in deliverance too. But I actually called the person back to full attention. And I said, why didn't you tell me about this? I asked you to be specific and to be honest with me. And you didn't tell me about this one particular thing. And she said, how did you know that? And I said, because you have this particular demon, and that demon only comes in through that kind of abuse. And she said, yeah, that's all true. And sure enough, it was. It absolutely was. And that's the whole thing, is the deliverance is ultimately, God uses people as instruments, but it's him doing the work through those people. And the Holy Spirit will work very strongly through the people ministering deliverance in ways that it's not even within that person to be able to do. God reveals things, and the Holy Spirit reveals things, So when you're saying that, there's so many things that are coming back to me of, oh yeah, that's, I can picture it. It's like totally the way a deliverance goes, So that goes on for approximately 3 hours. And basically you've gotten delivered of multiple spirits. And there's issues that he dealt with that you didn't even know anybody knew. So kind of take me from there.
I just thought as well, it might be like interesting to note that like at one stage he thought they all went. He's like, oh, she seems to have calmed down now. And then he's like, look at me. And he was like, I remember coming back into myself. And then he said to me, say these words, Lord Jesus, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And then he showed me, and I had to keep saying it. So I said it once. I remember me saying it as myself. And then I said it again as myself. And as I said it the third time, something came back up, and I was mocking and I was laughing at it. And apparently I was going like, Lord Jesus, like just joking around. And then he's like, you're not gone. And then I remember I still got the photo of like a cross, of Jesus on the cross. And he showed it me. And as he showed it me, they all conjured back up again. And then the deliverance started all over again. So I thought that was quite interesting, how you had to say those words to, to like react to it. So it all happened. And then they went, and I remember them sweating by the end of it. I was crying. They were sweating. It was just like, and I was exhausted. And he did say, you are going to like feel exhausted because you've been in a spiritual battle.
Absolutely.
And so I was just sitting there thinking like, what on earth has just happened? Like, this is very, very strange. And I remember texting my friend at the time, like, I think Christianity might be true. And I remember thinking, oh no, like, I really, really don't want it to be true, because I've spent 6 years like trying to, I thought I knew what Christianity was, and I didn't want to do that anymore. I didn't want to be a lovey, kind, pushover person. I didn't want to, not love horror, because that was my whole life and my identity. And so I was like, great. And I thought, and secondly, if it is true, I'm in big trouble, because I've been mocking Jesus so bad for the last 6 years that I'm probably going to still go to hell. And so I was like, oh no. So anyway, I went to bed quite soon after, because I was so exhausted. I woke up the next day, and the very first thing I noticed was that I was completely healed. Like the pain in my body, I felt a whole year completely gone. My breathing was normal. I could feel my legs. I could see. And my stomach pains was so persistent, completely gone. And I could like obviously see how skinny I was as well. But the most thing was that the bruises that were on my body, that were like obviously evidently on my body, had disappeared. And I was like, that's strange, like that's weird. So I noticed that shift, first of all, that I actually felt normal. The second thing I noticed was that my interest in horror, that had been my identity for 21 years, was completely gone. And not as though like I'd just lost interest. It was gone as though it was never there. And that's to this day, that's still the weirdest thing. I still can't believe I was the person who watched horror every single day and lived for it. It feels like it's just so unlike me. I felt like I woke up being the person that I was supposed to be. It's really strange. And so that was the second thing. I was like, hang on a minute. Where are my friends? Like these demons have been with me for like 6 years. Yeah. And I felt them there. They'd gone, and I actually felt quite lonely. I was like, wow, like it's silent. And so that was the second strangest thing. And then the third was, I forgot the third. I'll get back to you on that one.
That's
But
okay.
and so yeah, so there was like so that was like a really crazy experience. And so I was like, well, what do I do now? And so I spent the next like few days kind of just like thinking about like, well, I think it's like the next first day or so, just thinking like, did this really happen, or was it like psychological? Because again, I still didn't want Christianity to be true. So I was exploring every possible alternative thing. Like maybe it's a psychological thing where I was going for prayer, so I think I'm healed. But
Yeah.
it still didn't really make sense because I thought, well, I can't deny the physical change. I can't deny the mental change.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So
It's
yeah, it
like
was,
all that noise of the demonic around you was gone, you know. When
Mhm.
it's there, there is noise and there's something driving you that's not there now, you know.
Yeah, it was like my whole identity really. I felt lost and sad in a way because I didn't have an identity.
Yeah.
I woke up and I was like, who am I? Like I was grateful I could be healed. And I remember eating food and I was like, wow, I can eat food and not be sick. But then I'm like, well, what do I do now? I study horror at university. I
Yeah.
everything in my room is horror. Everything that I own is horror.
Yeah.
I I don't know who I was outside of that. And so
Mm-hmm.
that was very strange to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, I went back to uni, and you know, for some people, they expect me to say, and then I become a Christian, everything was fine, but I wasn't. I was still struggling, and like I was tired, like I was still drained mentally because I had been through an experience that wasn't like common, really.
Right.
And I didn't really have anyone to talk to because I didn't know anyone who'd been through it. So I just kind of started partying and drinking at uni again. I didn't want anything to do with the devil anymore, but I didn't want anything to do with God. I was done with the spirit realm. I just wanted to be in
Mm-hmm.
the present. But
Mm-hmm.
then, you know, I didn't know who I was in the present because my identity's been taken from me. So I just started to drink and party and things like that. Um, and so, yeah, so that happened. And obviously, it's still in the back of my mind. You can't really forget what you've just been through. I'm still questioning things, but
Mm-hmm.
drinking was just my way of coping, I guess. And then I went to a hotel one of the evenings where I work, and it was a very busy evening. And then this lady stopped me, one of the guests at the hotel, and she could see I was very busy, and I wasn't even her waitress, but she kind of called me over and she
Mm-hmm.
went, "Sorry, I just have to stop you because you look very interesting." I was like, "Do I?" And she was like, yeah, and she started asking me questions about like uni and what I studied. And that's very normal questions people used to ask me. But then she started getting very specific. She's like, "So what do you study at uni? Um, um, like, what are you writing about?" When I told her I studied writing, I was like, "Oh, well, I'm writing about horror, a horror story." And at the time, we had to write a horror story, but I didn't want to write horror anymore. And I didn't even know how to write horror because it's always been the demons. Even when I
Right.
sat down, I was like, "This is evil. I don't want to write about this." And so I started to write my story about a girl who like got possessed and had a deliverance. I was like, "Oh, I'm doing a horror show." "Yeah, but how are you writing it?" I was like, "That's very specific." I was like, "Oh, I'm kind of doing like a Christian twist, I guess." She's like, "Oh, are
Mm-hmm.
you a Christian?" I was like, "I don't know what I am." And she's like, "Well," I was like, "I don't know what I am because I've just kind of left the occult, so I don't know." And she's like, "Oh, really? Well, I'm an ex-occultist, and so she's like, I'm going to send you something." And I was like, "Okay." So I thought that was a bit bizarre, but I didn't really pay too much attention. And then a few weeks later, a some books got sent to my workplace, and one was spiritual house cleansing, how to like clean your house from spirits, and then the second one was a testimony that was relevant, but I won't go into it. And what it was, she wrote her number in the book, and I just texted to say, "Thank you for sending me a book." And then she sent me a voice message back saying, "This is like might sound really strange, but I booked a completely different hotel that evening. And then after I booked it, I felt the urge to pray. And as I prayed, God clearly told me to go to, and then she named the hotel. And I was like, oh, and then she said, and when I got to the hotel, I didn't really know why I was there. But as I looked up, I heard God clearly say, "You need to speak to that girl." And I just knew I had to say something to you. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I was like, So I kind of been pushing spirituality to the back of my mind. And this brought it back to the front again now. Like, Jesus might be onto something here. This might be like something more. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to explore this a bit more. So then I started to go to the Christian Union and to church. And it was like kind of a big step for me. This was the first time I'd ever been to church voluntary in my life. This was the
Mm-hmm.
same Christian Union I used to walk past and laugh at and curse and just want nothing to do with. I used to think they were pathetic, to be honest. And so, and now I was walking in like, I didn't know what I was doing. And so that was a big deal for me, really. And I shared my story with some people, and I asked someone to pray for me because of like, I've been drinking and things. And they just looked at me like I was crazy. And they kind of just like, yeah, just made me feel very, very silly. And so that embarrassed me, really. And then I went to church, and they kind of did the same. They didn't really know how to handle me. And so I felt really lonely and really just, I thought, well, if the Christians don't believe me, then no one's going to believe me. And so then I felt really crazy. And so that made me feel really isolated again. And I was like, God, if you are there, like, can you like show me something? Like, because I don't know what to do. And so then I carried on praying, and then I was having like more spiritual experiences where I thought God was speaking to me, but I wasn't quite sure. So one day I really prayed, and I was like, God, if that really was you, Jesus, if you were really the one who, delivered me the other week, I need to know that you're still with me, that you haven't left me. And if you show me that you're still with me, like I will commit myself to you. And so I prayed that prayer, but I really like cried it out. I didn't say it lightly. I really wanted to know the truth. And so I woke up the next day, and there was a parcel at my door. And as I opened the parcel, there was a little wooden cross inside and a note saying, "Keep Jesus close." And I didn't have a clue who it was from because I'd only just moved to this location. So I thought it was my mom, but it wasn't her because she was the only Christian I knew. She said, no, it wasn't me. So we did an investigation, and we found out it was a lady from my mom's house group who'd been praying for me. And I'd never met this lady in my life, and I don't really know how she knew about me or knew my details, but we found out she sent it me. So I was like, oh, that's a bit strange, but it's a coincidence, so I believe in coincidences. I didn't think too much of it. But bear in mind, I just said the prayer the night before. It was lingering on my mind. Then about an hour later, my mom sent me a message from a lady who, I can't remember if she used to teach me or she just used to know me from children's church when I was like 10 or 11. And she hadn't seen me since then, so she would have no reason to contact me. She didn't have me on Facebook. And she randomly reached out to my mom saying, I know this is really random, but I've just been praying or worshiping, and I just felt God. This song appeared on her phone, and she just felt like God was saying, this needs to be sent to me. So she went, can you send it to your daughter? I don't know why. So my mom sent me this song saying, does this mean anything to you? And I played the song, and it was a Christian song that was saying, you're not alone. I'm with you. I haven't left you. I'm walking beside you. And I just started crying because in the space of 2 hours, these two things just, were like a sign from God. And I was like, I was like, okay, Jesus, I think you've made yourself very clear. And like, it was just everything else as well. Like that was adding up, and it kind of just clicked in that moment. Like, wow, God is really like trying to like speak to me. And so I just started crying. I was like, okay, God, I'm going to serve you from now on. Like, I really do believe that you are showing me that you're here with me.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah.
It's funny when you were talking about the deliverance, and I got to wipe my eyes. I'm going to be honest with you. That story really got to me, and I've had similar experiences. So it resonates with me very much. So, but especially even with like the song, there's a story in one of my books about a Third Day song that came to me in a moment like that, and I felt like, man, that was God answering my prayer that he does care, and I felt like at that point that when Mac Powell wrote the song, the lead singer of Third Day, I felt like I really believe that when he wrote that, God gave him the song, and God knew everybody that was going to need to hear that, including me, and I think that the same with that song that was shared with you at that time, because it was the answer to your prayer, and it was exactly the answer you needed. Yeah. But I was thinking, when during the deliverance process, the pastor was having you say the sinner's prayer. So you were repenting, when you were saying, forgive me for I'm a sinner. That is, that's a prayer of repentance,
Yeah.
And so you were starting the journey right there. You were starting your journey, and that had to be part of the deliverance. I do believe that, but, the Bible says God will complete the work he began in you, so when you go through the time of doubt, he's not going to leave you in that. He's going to provide confirmation that he is there and that he does care, But when you were talking about the deliverance, like were there particular things that came up that ended up being like so realistic and confirmed to you that yes, 100%, this is what I was dealing with, and this is complete confirmation as far as spirits that were identified that the deliverance minister spoke of or told you about or anything like that?
Yeah, so actually after the deliverance, I can't remember if it's the same night or like a few days later when things had like calmed down, I guess. He told me what he saw in the spirit, and I don't know if the other lady saw it or he saw it, but he said there were 3 distinct demons that he recognized, and one was kind of a black shadow hanging over me, and I knew that one was there, and I think that was the one that had been following me since I was 15, because I felt like that since that night that shadow appeared by my bed. And he was always with me, so I knew he was there. And then he said there was one kind of attached to the side of me. And then he said there was one that was the spirit of the Kundalini, which was a snake, and it coils. It comes from like beneath you, I guess.
Yeah.
And then so those were the 3 main ones. And then he also mentioned I was possessed through my eyes, so I had like something over my eyes. I guess in the way that's why I couldn't really see the truth, I guess, because my eyes were sealed in that sense. I was deceived in that way. And so, yeah, I had those 3 spirits. And then he said they were all spewing over me, like being sick, or they were putting something over me like filth. And I was like, okay. And I thought like nothing of it. And then I had an automatic writing book. And this is where I used to like write like my notes and doodles automatically and read back on them later. And it's a very dark stuff in here. But I kept it because I'll try and show it on camera. If not, I'll send you the photo. Okay. But as I was looking through it one of the nights, I saw the exact same scene that he was describing. So if you can see there, you can see kind of me crying in the middle, and then a dark shadow over me, a snake at the bottom, and something at the side, and they're all kind of like spewing over me.
Yes, absolutely.
And then I did one at the bottom, and you can see something's over my eyes.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Absolutely. Covering your eyes. And it's a devil, and it's covering up your eyes.
And so yeah.
And that was drawn while you were through automatic writing. That was like a demonic drawing that you didn't even realize you did.
No, years ago before this happened. And so when I saw it, I was like, oh my goodness, like you can't get more specific than that. And so
no.
So I was like, wow. So yeah, that was crazy.
That is amazing. But again, it shows how real God is. You know, the devil is real. I mean, all you got to do is look around the world and see all the evil that's happening everywhere right now. The devil's real, and the spirit realm and the demons are real, but God's real. God's way more powerful. The Holy Spirit's way more powerful. The prayers of the saints, the followers of Christ, you know, those have power, and the gifts of the Holy Spirit are real. I mean, right there, this guy's saying these things, he's being shown these things, and they're completely confirmed from automatic writing way earlier. God revealed to him what was going on in the spirit realm demonically. And then there's the older lady there who can see in the spirit realm and is casting them out too. You know, it's so real. And, you know, the idea though, that, you know, God didn't just deliver you and leave you there. He showed you this is real. I'm real, you know, and I can relate to what you were saying about, you know, you went to the people you thought were Christians in the Christian Union and you try to talk to them about it and they don't get it. Sadly, the church should get this, but they don't. Most of the church is against this. It's against deliverance ministry. It's against biblical truth, unfortunately. But there are people here and there, faithful few, who believe the truth, are willing to engage the enemy. You know, they recognize we are in a spiritual war. There was a war going on for your soul. No question about it. I believe wholeheartedly there's a calling on your life. Satan tried to corrupt that. He tried to destroy it, but God brought you through that. And he has a call on your life. No question in my mind about that.
Yeah. I think that's why it's important to share stories as well. Like I said, I'm very private, and I think this is actually the first time I've actually sat. I mean, it's been 4 years since it happened, and it's the first time I sat down and spoke, I guess, publicly or online to someone about it. I mean, in my personal life, I'm happy talking to people. I'll tell whoever. I don't care if they believe me because it happened. But I don't really like to put myself out there. But at the same time, that's why I am writing a book, because it's like stories like your book, and I think I've read is it Laura Maxwell and Doreen, I forgot her last name, but like other spiritual, like people who've been through similar things, and I'm reading it and I think it just makes me feel less crazy, it makes me feel less alone, and yeah, so I think that's why it's important to share the story, even if it's like, you know, uncomfortable. So yeah.
And I think there's a calling on you for writing, and that's the devil was trying to corrupt that. But there
Yeah.
is a calling, there is a calling, and it will be about the supernatural. Only it's going to be about the good side, because it's going to show the who wins in the end, And I think that's the important part, because the devil wants everybody to think he wins. He's not going to win.
Yeah.
Your testimony shows that.
Yeah, and that's what I noticed the most, because after the deliverance and after I even gave myself to Christ, I was still getting visitations like quite bad. And that was really scary, because actually it scared me more than ever, because I never used to be scared of demons. And now for the first time, I'm realizing they're evil. But every single time that I said Jesus, they would go straight away. And so that was like really assuring to know. And then, so yeah, even though I was still getting these horrible things, I was like using my gifts for the right reason. So I was recognizing they're evil. And when God was sending me out on the streets to speak to people, like I can still see demons in people to this day. I can still see spirit in the spirit realm to an extent, but I discern now like what's going on. And like, so when I'm talking to people, and this was actually prophesied over me at my baptism, I know things about people that they haven't revealed to me. And I know how to pray for them, and I know I can see deeper into like the spiritual roots of something. So I'm using kind of like it's everything I used to do before, but now I'm using it for godly purposes. And so yeah, it's good knowing now how to deal with those.
Yeah, and you had the gifts. God had gifts that He wanted you to use, and again, the devil was just trying to corrupt them. But you are, I totally get that. Like you can talk to somebody, and you know exactly what's really going on with them, and it's it, and it's true, and it helps you understand them. It helps you understand why they think the way they do, or why they're at the place in their life that they're at, because you can see what, like, spiritually what is going on, and what their experiences have been. It's kind of sad, because but it also, it's all part of a gifting, and it is so you can pray effectively, for them, and honestly sometimes against them. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but like sometimes people have things going on spiritually that need to be bound to stop them from continuing down the path they're on. And that's, Bible's clear about binding and loosing, and we have that authority to bind and bind spirits in Jesus' name, and we have the authority to loose them from things in Jesus' name as well. So that's all part of the Christian life, and being a soldier for Christ, so to speak.
Yeah, I think the biggest transformation as well was just like once I gave my life to God, like I was completely like born again, like in every way. Like I was a bit crazy, to be honest. I was on the streets like wanting to tell everyone what had just happened, that Jesus is real. I was so excited, and but the strange thing was I still hadn't read the Bible yet. It's like, and that's how I kind of know it was real, because my heart was completely changed, to the point that when I did pick up the Bible, and he was saying, I'll give you a new heart and I'll give you these spirits. I was like, that happened to me. And it's like the words were coming alive. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. Because I had so much love, but love in like a healthy way. And I just wanted to like have so much compassion and joy. And I knew things about God in the Bible that were in the Bible. I didn't know they were in the Bible yet. And I just knew they were truth. And when I'd speak to people, I was convicting people. And yet I didn't even know really what I was saying, because I was a new Christian. And yet I was convicting all these people. And I was just like, this has to be God, because this isn't me. I don't know what I'm saying. And then I picked up the Bible. I was like, wow, this really is true, because it's happened. It's real. And that just strengthened my faith even more.
Can you give me an exact example of, you were thinking of something, and you opened the Bible right to that, and it confirmed that you were being led spiritually by God to do something?
Yeah. So my baptism, before I got baptized, like I got delivered in the September, and then that kind of encounter with God, I think, was the end of October maybe. And so I was like, committed by, say, beginning of November. And I was like, all right, I want to get baptized. But then I was thinking, yeah, but I haven't really read the Bible. I don't really know a lot about Christianity. All I know is that Jesus has saved me. So I was like, is that enough to get baptized? I don't know. So I was sitting in church, like, and these thoughts were going through my head. And suddenly Romans 6 kept coming to me over and over again. I was like, right, I have to look at Romans 6 because it's getting on my nerves. I didn't even know where the book of Romans was in the Bible. I flicked to it, and the first thing I saw was talking about like why you should be baptized, or it's talking about baptism. And I was like, wow, like, I mean, there's my answer. That was easy. So it's just like, but God was constantly doing that, speaking to me in such a way that I was like, this has to be God. Like, and it's always for good reasons, for a good purpose. And he was like telling me like where to go to help people. And then I'd go to that location. There's someone there who was literally praying at the time saying, oh, I was just praying to God because I was like, about to commit suicide. And I was like, okay. And so like, or like I'd be walking through the supermarket and people would start to like have demonic attacks. And then I'd be walking past at the same time so I could like minister to them. It's like I was always at the right place at the right time, using the gifts for God's glory. And it was really crazy.
Yeah, that is awesome. That's part of the Christian life, though. It absolutely is. I used to, I worked in a hospital and I'd pick up a lot of overtime doing patient sitting. And a lot of the vast majority of the patient sitting was people that with suicidal ideation or suicide attempts. They were in a place in their life, it was very dark and very low. And many, many, many times, it was so crazy. I would go into the room. They didn't know me. I didn't know them. I was briefed before I went in what their issues were. And I was basically in there just for their protection, so they couldn't harm themselves or anything like that. And so many times they didn't know me. They'd start asking me questions about the Bible. And I was like, well, since you ask, I'm open to discuss that with you, And I would just feel led to say, God would just show me exactly what to say. And I can't even tell you the amount of people that would say at the end of the night, I'm getting ready to go home, and they would say, there is no question in my mind that God put you in here because you knew exactly what I needed to hear. I mean, these people didn't know each other, and it happened over and over and over and over. And that's to me, that's part of the Christian life, and that should be what Christians are always experiencing, that they know just in their everyday life, in their, everyday walk, there's experiences where God's putting them in somebody's path or using them in some way to be an answered prayer to somebody, and I think it's awesome that you're experiencing that, because it's the Christian, true Christianity. There's nothing like it. It's so real. You can't go back to how you used to think, because you get the truth. You totally understand it. You understand the spirit realm. You understand, the things of the Holy Spirit and of God that you didn't before. Your eyes are open.
Yeah, I find that I suddenly loved the things that God loved, and I hated the things he hated. And it's just like I had such a deep understanding that I never had when I was a child. I'd never really been taught about what born again actually meant. And that's why I think, I was trying to be this good person, and it was just letting me down because I'd never had a heart change. I just thought in my head it was just rules to follow. Whereas now, it's not rules to follow, it's rules that I've written on my heart. It's completely different experience.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, is there anything else you would like to share here as we're wrapping up?
There probably is, but I can't. My mind always goes blank. I think I'm just, like I said, I'm just trying to put it all into a story at the moment, just because there's obviously so much more that I've left out, because your mind forgets it all. Like it's just a lot to say, like in person. So I'm putting it all in with photos. So hopefully that will help people. But also, if you're like, even Christians, if they are like watching horror movies and think it's harmless, or they listen to like, when I moved to this like Christian environment, I saw so many people wearing like heavy rock band T-shirts, or even Harry Potter. And I know and growing up, even my mom used to think, oh, that's only like silly Christians or strict Christians. But so much of it is just darkness, and we're called to be the light. And so we can't be dabbling in that. Even if it just starts off as an innocent interest, you don't know the spiritual implications it can have and what it can lead you to.
Absolutely. Yeah. The devil's always looking for a door cracked open that he can exploit, so yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah. And as you write, I can't wait till you get the book done. Again, there's always more details in the book than you can ever share in a movie, than you can ever share in an interview. You can share key points, but the book's always going to be better because there's more detail that makes the testimony even more powerful, and what you've shared tonight's extremely powerful. And I really appreciate you being on the program. Hopefully we can have you on again sometime. And, I'll be praying for you as you're finishing your book and writing your book, because I know it's a task. It's an undertaking, certainly. Yeah. But again, I want to thank you, Demi, for being on the program. And to the viewers and listeners, I want to thank you for tuning in tonight. I hope something that was shared tonight resonates with you, changes your thinking, changes your heart, and draws you closer to God, because that's ultimately what everything's really all about. And as you can tell, the truth really is stranger than fiction. The fiction is the things we're told that are lies from Satan. The truth is much more real, and it's better than anything anyone could make up. So thank you for tuning in. Again, I'm Patrick Meekin. I'm the author of Nightmare in Holmes County and 225th Street, which both are technically Christian books, sharing the truths of the spirit realm and my experiences in 2 consecutive yet unrelated haunted houses. Thank you for tuning in. Good night and God bless.
Right.